All right, good morning. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Happy 250th anniversary of America. We're excited for that. Yeah. I'm also personally very excited that we have finished the final legislative session of Tim Walz's governorship. And at the same time, I'm most excited that you're here this morning to have this conversation, to talk about what happened in this legislative session, to talk about the future. I have the great honor of representing you in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I'm Isaac Schultz, if we haven't met already. I serve District 10B, which includes the rural portions of Benton County. It includes Foley and Rice. It also includes the southern half of Morrison County, the central part of Mille Lacs, and then small portions of Kanabec and Isanti. So approximately 42,000 people live in this community, in this district, and I'm just finished up serving in my fourth legislative session. So with that, a lot of today's conversation will be about the things that matter to you, and whether it's something that's happening here at home, here in Foley, whether it is something that's happening from the state that's impacting you and your family or the people who you care about, or you have questions about what happened during the legislative session, or where we go from here. All those questions are on the table. As a reminder, we have Colton Communications who are recording this, and they do share it online afterwards. And so when we get to the point of questions this morning, we want, number one, I want your questions. So please bring up the topics that matter to you, the topics that you're seeing out there in the world. That's what matters most to me. I'm here to report back to you on what happened, but also to solicit your feedback and get your good ideas too, so that it's about the future. But when you do, so when you ask a question, say a name and either the city that you're from, or if you live in the township, like St. George Township, say that, and that just helps me make a connection to a face and a name, whether we've met before, whether this is the first time that we've met. So I appreciate that. I'll just start by saying the legislative session finished essentially on May 18th, so it's been about 3 weeks. As you know, I love to host town hall meetings. Last time I was here was right as the legislative session kicked off in February. I usually host at least one town hall during every month that we are in session across the counties that I represent. So with that, this legislative session achieved far more than I ever anticipated it would, especially in divided government. Usually when you're heading into an election cycle where everyone's on the ballot, things can get pretty divisive, and frankly a lot of stuff can get left by the wayside and deals aren't made. But that was actually the opposite of what was true this legislative session. With a tied house at 67 Republicans, 67 Democrats, with the Senate, 34 Democrats, 33 Republicans, and a Democratic governor who wasn't running for re-election, it actually created a magic sauce where a giant deal was made and a ton of things happened and were signed into law and passed. Now, some of us will look at it and be like, yeah, but these aren't too big of changes, or I'm not going to see too much change in my life. That too is also true. So high level, things that I'm most excited about is some level of tax relief. Certainly I want more, a lot more, and I will continue to work on structural change to taxes here in Minnesota. I think that top line, Minnesotans have been feeling the pinch on property taxes and on car tab fees. If you happen to own any vehicle that is 6 years old or newer, you know that car tab fees are right around $1,000 right now. And that is a change that was made by Democrats when they had the complete control of state government. Good morning, welcome. Back in 2023 and 2024. And this change is going to mean that next year, beginning in 2027, for 1 year, they're going to return to the 2022 levels for those car tab fees. And for Republicans, we will continue to champion lower car tab fees. We think it's actually outrageous that you have to pay that amount of money, which is so out of tune with our neighboring states as it relates to car tab fees. So that's going to be a significant reduction. Again, that could be between $600 and $800 of relief if you own a vehicle that is 6 years old or newer. Now, I'll be real honest. I know there are plenty of us who live in rural communities like this one and where I come from, where frankly our families have like 4 or 5 or 6 vehicles, but they're all 10 years old, right? And so, will the car tab fee reduction be as big of a deal for us? Maybe not, but that's something that we need to continue to work on in the future. Additionally, property taxes are such a heavy burden, especially for people on fixed incomes or for young families. Many people are being priced out of their homes, and that's across the state. This isn't something that is about any one locality like the city of Foley or Benton County. This is something where Minnesotans at large are feeling, and it is, in my opinion, heavily driven by decisions made up the pipeline from local units of government. So what that means is state government and the federal government both sometimes send down mandates that don't have the funding mechanisms to pay for them, and then they have to get picked up by local units of government. And I know, for just thinking about my own home, in the last 5 years, it has gone up, my property taxes have gone up by a full third, right? And that's literally like an additional $1,000 every single year, just in the last 5 years. And to me, that means we have a structural issue with the way that we do this. And it's really, frankly, I find it pretty unfair the way that the system is currently set up. So long term, I think that property tax reform is something that has to happen in Minnesota for everyone's sake. It's just one of those real large cost drivers for the state. But this year, the relief is coming in terms of an enhanced homestead property tax refund. And so what that means is for most families in this room, families who make under $142,500 a year are going to see approximately $173 of additional property tax relief to help keep those lower. And I know in today's environment, what does that mean? That's like maybe two tanks of gas for Scott and I, right? And at the same time, it's 2 tanks of gas, right? And so, that's meaningful, and at the same time, we know there's so much more work to do. So that was big on that frame. There is so much more. One of the things we had to do this session was to ensure that we were bringing together Minnesota state policy with what the federal government passed in one big beautiful bill as it relates to work requirements to receive Medicaid benefits, or specifically medical assistance, so welfare benefits here in the state. And so ultimately that had to be done, or the state would lose $3.5 billion worth of federal dollars to the state. And we did that. Now, those work requirements are for able-bodied working adults. We're talking about people who are age 18 to 64, and people who don't live with a disability, and not pregnant women. And so the specifications are really over able-bodied adults who have those requirements. So and that was a big deal. The only way that was able to be achieved, the only way that Democrats would go for that and sign that into law, is if they got one of their top priorities this session, which was to support and subsidize the Hennepin County Medical Center. And that became a major point of contention, but also a big reason why we were able to get those work requirements passed, because the Hennepin County Medical Center is at least in a deficit of at least $200 million in the short term, and has long-term challenges to its funding mechanisms, which we should all talk about at some point, and hopefully here this morning. So that ended up being the thing that brought the deal together. So there's work requirements, there is the additional support for HCMC, and then another focus of the legislative session was school safety. Because of the tragic and horrific shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, one of the major focuses was ensuring that every school, no matter zip code, no matter whether it's a public school or any non-public school or a tribal school, that they had access to dollars to enhance the school safety in their community. And so there is additional support in this package that passed the legislature for school safety. It dwarfs what, frankly, both parties were working on, but it is, threat assessments and anonymous reporting of those threats, and it gives additional dollars to many local schools to be able to do enhancements to their school safety. So those are a few good things that came out of the school safety conversation. As a part of that conversation, though, I want to not miss what was something that you all saw on the news, which was that in response to the shooting in that school, the Democratic Party was pushing for some of the most radical gun control that is seen anywhere in the nation. And that would have limited commonly used rifles and restricted them from private ownership and use in Minnesota. It would have also reduced the amount of bullets that you could have in your gun, and in addition to that, made it a felony to take apart your gun and reassemble it 3 times in a year, which amounts to simply cleaning your gun 3 times in a year would make you a felon. Which, oh, by the way, if you have any young people who are part of a track team, they're probably doing that in a week. And so that piece of legislation wasn't ready for prime time, nor was it something that I believe that our community or the vast majority of Minnesotans would have ever accepted, as that is a strict infringement on Second Amendment rights. Then one of the so that ultimately there was a whole bunch of drama around that piece of legislation because it passed the Minnesota Senate. Despite being 34 to 33, every single Democrat in the Minnesota Senate, no matter any Democrat who claims to be a blue dog or claims that they are moderate, every single Senate Democrat voted for that radical gun control. So it came over to the House. But House Republicans, with having 67 members, stood firm and protected constitutional rights. So that was a really big deal, and that was something that got a lot of the news through the end of the legislative session. Then a major infrastructure bill was passed this session, a bonding bill which provides primarily for funding for roads and bridges, for water infrastructure, and then because that bill takes a 60% vote in both the House and the Senate, it does have a few other flunkers and a few other things that I wouldn't want to see funded. But in a lot of ways, in order to get a bill like that across the finish line, things like community centers in Minneapolis are funded, and that's just the reality of that. The other thing, and a big reason that I didn't support that bill, is that maxed out the state's credit card. Our state is actually known for having a really strong bond rating, we're at the top tier in that category today. But we, in this bill, that $1.2 billion bonding bill, actually goes beyond what we were said to have been a safe amount of bonding this session. So, but I'll be honest, that was a tricky one for me because it also included that same bill. Included the provision to cut the car tag fees for 1 year. So sometimes things are put together in one package, and it makes it harder for legislators to be able to decide whether you're a yes or you're a no on some of these things, especially when you support reducing car tag fees, but I don't want to saddle future generations with a whole bunch of debt, right? So then I would say another major conversation for us to be having is about the obvious highest and top concern for us all, which is fraud in Minnesota. With over $9 billion of projected fraud within Medicaid, so much has been on the front burner for all Minnesotans as we have watched our tax dollars be taken from our pockets and gone to fraudsters, to people who have stolen from us and then enriched themselves while at the same time claiming to serve vulnerable Minnesotans. And these programs are set up to serve people with disabilities, to serve people who have autism, to serve people who are in the golden years of their life. And when we have a group of people who are stealing those dollars and not providing that care, it ultimately harms the most vulnerable in our communities. And as we approach that conversation, our top priority was passing our independent Office of Inspector General, which has eyes over now all of state government, is not under the thumb of the governor. I know we talked about this one of our previous times here, but let me lay out for you why I believe this is important. The Office of the Inspector General will be independent from the governor. That person who is ultimately put into the position as the Inspector General has to be developed and brought forward through a list of applicants and put forward by a bipartisan group of legislators in the House and the Senate. And they will select a number of nominees that are brought forward and given to the governor. The governor will select one. That one person who is selected then has to be formally affirmed by a 3/5 vote of the Senate, which means that it would have to have the scrutiny of bipartisan support no matter the political makeup, because if you look back at Minnesota history, there has always been that level of balance between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. So you'd have to have a Republican vote for a person to become that Inspector General. But that person would have the authority to investigate, to have law enforcement authority, so to arrest, and also to prosecute fraud. And that is not just individual level fraud, that is provider level fraud, that is fraud that is seen within the departments and state agencies across all of the state agencies, and to hold even the bureaucrats, the people who work in those agencies, accountable. In addition to having the ability for all of those tools to investigate, to arrest, to prosecute within the lens of top elected leadership. And they will have the look back, to look back at what has happened in the past as well. So that office has a ton of authority. That will formally have all of its authorities beginning on January of 2028. So it will take about 18 months to stand that up, but it will have the look back power. It will be able to look back at what happened during the Walz administration. It will have that authority to ensure that we're stopping fraud. And one key thing that this will sound bizarre to all of us. Here in Minnesota, when an individual or a business had committed fraud against one program under one state agency, that didn't mean that that same individual working with another business couldn't be receiving money from a different state agency over here, which is something that was happening frequently between someone who was receiving money through the Department of Human Services, but then later was convicted of fraud over here, but then was getting grants from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I mean, that just blows our mind, but this office will be able to lead that fraud investigation and process across all of state government, and to be able to see it on the whole better than ever before. And so I personally am quite excited about that, and I think it's going to be the right thing, especially considering the number of headlines that we all see on fraud almost every single night when we watch the news. And so, yes, it does come with cost. Approximately $12 million per biennium is the cost on that. Certainly, I hope that you and others do scrutinize that in the future, because that's all of our money. And we have to demand results from that too, to be able to stop the fraud. But we know that this fraud crisis has been an embarrassment to all of us. And we have lost trust in our own government. And this is about restoring that trust, so that we can say, when we have to pay our taxes, that it's going to do the things that the legislature has set out, that it has set in law to do, right? And it's ultimately about that. With that, there was some additional support that I'm excited about, that I'm hoping that Commissioner Johnson is quite excited about, to help support the data modernization for counties and the state as it relates to how we do our human services programs. So a lot of these programs today, and the staff that works for Benton County or any county across the land, are dealing with green screen type technology from the 1980s that literally predates me. And a significant amount of money is going to be able to modernize that technology, to bring it into the 21st century, and ultimately prepare us well for the future. So that these programs, these same programs that we all pay an enormous amount of money for, that we have strong program integrity, that there is an ability to stop payments when someone is no longer eligible, and to stop the error and the waste that is found in those programs. So that was a whole bunch. You can see that on the sheet that I brought, but I think there might be a couple of them more in the back. But with that, I'm going to stop and take your questions and hear your concerns on what is happening right now. So thank you again for being here. Who has the first question?
How many people do they figure will be in the fraud investigation?
It'll be a couple dozen people that are in that department, and then they'll also work with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension on further investigation there. So it'll be several dozen people. Yeah, it will be worth it, especially if we stop the fraud, right? Yes, sir.
So when the Office of Inspector General determines that there's charges that need to be brought, you said they have the power to bring charges, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So then they recommend it, and then does it go to the BCA for actual prosecution? Is the Attorney General out of the picture for that part of it?
Well,
The
certainly.
Attorney General's office?
Certainly the Attorney General's office could be a part of it. It will depend upon what the given program is, right? So as an example, right now, when you are seeing the charges brought in Medicaid-related fraud, a lot of times the best place for that charge to be brought is actually in federal court, right? So then it's working in partnership with whomever the appropriate authority would be. So in that instance, probably U.S. Attorney's Office. If it would be appropriately taken care of by the Minnesota Attorney General, then it would likely be that office. It could be the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, right? There's a whole group of investigators just within the Attorney General's office that deals with Medicaid fraud. So it will depend upon the individual given circumstance as to who they're working with.
Did you know it's a problem in the Attorney General's office for some of the charges that were put forward in the past? If you have the Attorney General's office involved, do you see that might be a problem just like you would with the governor having someone involved with it?
Yes and no. Number one, this current Attorney General is seeking re-election for his third term. Not all too often that we're seeing third terms for these constitutional offices. And I for one, number one, I have signed on to the articles of impeachment against Keith Ellison, right? And I don't believe that he should be serving in that office. All 4 Republican congressional members in Minnesota asked him to resign this week following the U.S. House Oversight report on his role in feeding our future. And it's my opinion that his role in feeding our future is a perfect example why he should be out of office today. And I hope that for the sake of the people in this room and for all Minnesotans, that he is removed from office this November. That's my hope. Ultimately, that office exists like it's supposed to be a consumer protection division, right? To protect taxpayers and consumers. And so we have to have an office like that is doing the work across, essentially enforcing state law where appropriate. And it's disappointing that he didn't in Feeding Our Future. And frankly, I think it should be shocking to us all that when we're seeing these major headlines and news stories as it relates to Medicaid fraud, that they're almost entirely being announced through the lens of the U.S. Attorney's Office and not the Minnesota Attorney General. And I guess I find that surprising, considering the amount of fraud that we've seen. And I know it takes a lot to build these cases, but I would be expecting more from his office, especially to make those announcements public so that we all see them.
And so if there's someone the same or similar that gets in that office, that gets presented information, and then gets declined to pursue it, that there's another avenue, like you said, the federal government or somebody in the state of Minnesota that can take the charges and run this and do that prosecution.
Yeah, there are. The answer is there are. There are multiple different avenues, right? And I'll just take it like that. So sitting on the Fraud Prevention Committee these last 2 years, when we have had a credible allegation of fraud, obviously we don't have that law enforcement authority or that ability to prosecute, but what have we done? We've taken that credible allegation, we've looked at it and said, okay, who should receive this? Who should take action on this? Is it the U.S. Attorney's Office? Is it the FBI? Is it the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension? Is it the State Attorney General's Office? And we have redirected it or pushed it through the entity to which we thought it was most appropriate. And that's exactly what would happen for these fraud cases. Next question.
What about the other side of the fence, where you have the foster homes and stuff
Yeah.
right now
Yes.
that are suffering because of that fraud.
Yes. Absolutely.
Where do we go and get our help?
Thank you. And your name, ma'am?
Oh, Kathy Kilness, Foley.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. So, great question. So, as you saw on the news right at May 31st, the Department of Human Services had to go through this process based upon a requirement from the federal government to revalidate every Medicaid service provider that provides services within a high-risk program for fraud. And there are over 5,600 providers of these services, and the Department of Human Services had that deadline to do it. The federal government was asking for that, and honestly, at this moment, I question whether the Department of Human Services actually got the job done, or if all the applications that came from service providers here in our community, if they came in and then no one thoroughly vetted them, nobody looked through, they didn't get through their stacks of paper, and what the Department of Human Services chose to do was just fail or terminate every employer that they didn't work through the paperwork for. That's my current belief. And so when that announcement came out, there's, again, 5,600 providers. They basically said that only 2,000 of the 5,600 had been approved to continue service. This is impacting service providers in our community. It is impacting people in Foley, it is impacting people in Malacca, it is impacting people in Morrison County. It's happening. This is real. This is real in our community for providers who are providing legitimate services to vulnerable people in our community. And so now is the appeal process. And the original hope was that the appeal process was only going to take 7 to 10 days. Well, we're at that point now where we should have more certainty. I am in touch with the service providers who have reached out to me about this and made sure to give them the information that I am privy to, which is that if you are one of these service providers that was failed by the Department of Human Services for one reason or another, and oftentimes the most frequent things are that the ownership of an agency wasn't the same from what their filing is with the Secretary of State's office or the Attorney General's office and what the Department of Human Services has, or it was a question over what is the service being provided. And frankly, from what I've seen so far in the conversations I've had with service providers in our community, the people who came out to do site visits from the Department of Human Services had no idea what they were even doing. They weren't qualified to be doing the work of this revalidation process. And so, for those service providers who have been terminated, the process that I have been instructed to share from the Department of Human Services down through our House of Representatives Human Services Committee is, number one, for those service providers to appeal that termination notification, to appeal it, and then to answer thoroughly the question over the issues stated for the individual service provider. Address the issue, provide the clarity, find the fix, and apply it. And then submit that information as soon as possible, and then continue to bill Medicaid. Those are the instructions that we've been given. Because, again, this is caring for the vulnerable people in our community. At the same time, we have to stop the fraud. Okay? So those are the instructions. If that's your business or anyone else in the room or across our community, those are the instructions today as they work through the appeal process. This appeal process will ultimately happen here, most likely this summer. At some point, we'll be given this certainty. But it is disappointing that the Department of Human Services didn't do their job and didn't finish their work prior to that May 31st deadline, which is impacting so many legitimate providers in our community.
We get a monthly statement that says, this is my brother-in-law Ron, my husband Russ. We get a monthly statement that verifies what the foster home gets, what has to be paid. The termination, they gave his foster home a termination date. to get him out of there. Everybody out of there. But now we get a statement, and they've reduced the caregiver's money by a extreme amount.
By a third.
No explanation, just boom, we get the sheet of paper in the mail.
When did that happen?
Starting the 1st of June. I got the sheet out in the mail this week,
Okay.
but it actually cut the amount by 1/3, which is a huge drop.
Sure.
And this is Emily Ron's caregiver.
Hi, I'm Emily Heron, and I do have a question. So what I'm a little bit confused about with the revalidation, and I have been in this field since I graduated high school in 1999, and I've been serving through foster care in many counties throughout this state. And I'm here for my people, for the people that have different abilities, and that is why I'm here. And so the question I have, I live in Foley and Benton County, and I think that our county does an excellent job. They do an amazing job with making sure that we are licensed every single year. Our county licensor comes to our house. Our county licensor and our social workers, we do face-to-face meetings 2, 3, 4 times a year. So the part that I'm confused about with the revalidation is we also license through the county and we also license through the state. So with the fraud part, I'm like, where was the breakdown between there? Because I know in Benton County we do an awesome job of, there would be no way that our county people wouldn't know the people that we serve because they know them on, I would say, a personal level. They do an amazing job. So that's where the revalidation, I started the license with the state in 2014 and they didn't revalidate me until 2025.
Wow.
And my revalidation sat in revalidation from February 2025. I called them 15, 20 times begging them to open it, and it was opened in April of 2026. And by April of 2026, when I got the stuff in that they said it wasn't enough time. And Ron is living with us. How old are you, Ron?
84.
He's 84, and he would like to live with us until he's 106 years old. Is that right? 106? And all these people that I serve, and all my staff here today, we want to serve the people, and we want to follow the law. We always have followed the law. We always will follow the law. And we also want to take care of the people, but it's pretty important that this stuff happens pretty quickly. I'm going to help my people no matter what. A zero budget is something that's hard to work with, but it's coming quickly together. I can see that it's coming quickly together. But I'd just like to say on behalf of Benton County that I work with several counties actually. I work with mostly small counties, and they do an excellent job of licensing us. So I'm confused why the licensing and revalidation don't kind of work together. Does anyone get what I'm saying? Or not? Because I think they do an excellent job. They're at my house, they see my filing cabinets, they could be part of the revalidation process.
right.
Could
Yeah.
they or not? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think that they should be, right? I think that one of the greatest challenges that we have is lack of communication, honestly, between government. And that's not Commissioner Johnson's fault or my fault or,
No, not
right?
pointing
It is providing, and it's also the technology that we use that help those that should enhance those communications. So the hope is this data modernization piece that was passed this year on a broad bipartisan basis is something that will enhance both ends of that communication between the state and the county. But then in addition, at least from my own experience, I would tell you that the people who work at the county level, at that most local level, they're probably better trained and more well equipped to make make some of these decisions about revalidation than someone from the state. And the disappointing story from an example from someone who lives in our district is that this person who came to do the site visit from the Department of Human Services came to visit a provider just like you. They have 2 separate businesses. They're providing 2 separate Medicaid-funded services. and the person who came to do the on-site visit didn't even know who they were coming, which business they were coming to appropriately inspect or see, nor did they know the questions to appropriately ask. And it was as if that person who was doing that on-site visit had been pulled from some other agency or department trying to help the Department of Human Services meet their deadline. And I don't think that that's acceptable in the eyes of anyone in this room. And so we need to make sure that people are well trained to do the job that we're asking them to do, because it's impacting people's lives. And so this week, House Republicans and some Senate Republicans as well sent a letter to the governor and said, hey, this is an emergent situation. This is something where we need help now. What has happened is unacceptable. The failure of DHS, which clearly, from every conversation, from everything we see on the news, is one of the this is one of the most poorly run departments in state government, and I wouldn't be surprised if our Department of Human Services was one of the worst in the nation at their lack of transparency and accountability and responsiveness to people. And so we need an emergency command center to be able to take in every concern like yours and be able to say, okay, how do we solve the problem for your situation and get a response to you faster? And that's what the focus needs to be now. So we sent that letter to the governor, I want to say on Tuesday of this week, and we are already seeing those positive signs, right? I got a notification from another provider yesterday saying, it looks like more certainty is right on the horizon here. So that's the hope at this time. Commissioner, is there anything more that you wanted to add to that?
First of all, I want to thank you for the very nice time that you've been us in Human Services staff, public health staff. The representative before unfunded mandates, challenge in Human Services. What I see too is frustrating to us is you have these 22-year-olds that graduate out of college and they want to provide services to other people, right? They want to work for Human Services. And they come in and they're inundated with these green screens, the S400 systems, and they spend 6 of their 8 hours a day trying to figure the systems out instead of actually helping people. And then what happens is they get frustrated and they leave. So we get this revolving door, right? And that ends up costing all of us a ton of money. It costs the county a lot of money to train people and then to see them leave. So this IT modernization hopefully is going to be an awesome thing. Quite frankly, it was $95 million. I don't know how far that's going to get us statewide, but it's to his point, not just that the county, we can't communicate with DHS the way we need to, we can't communicate with other counties the way we need to. We've got all these programs. Benton County has 65 mandated human service programs in the state of Minnesota, and it's about $17 million for our county budget. So it's a big load. And when these unfunded mandates continue, without good communication, without good resolve from the state, these type of things happen. I did hear at Association of Minnesota Counties district meeting last week to kind of follow up. It sounds like this is going to happen in the days. But that was May 31st, here we now, June 12th.
Yeah.
What's soon going to mean? And
Yeah.
obviously affecting providers.
So I'll say this, I have had examples in our community of providers who did receive the termination notice, they appealed, and they have also already now, after their appeal, been revalidated. So that has happened too. So some of these things are moving quickly, which is a good thing. We want that. I want to add on to what you said about data and IT modernization. There's an opportunity here. So for every taxpayer in the room, be excited. In this era where we obviously have more automation, we have more ability to evaluate data faster, this IT modernization should allow and should create efficiencies at every part of government. It should happen at the county level, it should happen at the state level, and that will filter up to the federal level as well. And in my eyes, that means that a few years from now, upon fully implementing this, we should be at a place where the cost of government and the actual administration of government should go down. That is my expectation. When we're doing this modernization, it shouldn't take the same number of people to do the work when you're not working from a green screen anymore. So from every property taxpayer in this room, that should be relief that is on the horizon once this system is up and running. So I want you to know that, like that is a key part of this equation. As you know, it's rather outrageous to us as consumers who have to watch government that can't keep up with the trends in technology and modernization, that we all are carrying the burden of outdated technology, right? That is the problem that we are seeking to overcome to help us for the future. So, next question.
I know you talked a little bit about the service providers that are having problems and legitimate providers, but I think, is there numbers out there now regarding the ones that are being kicked off or not reapplying the fraudsters? What is the aspect on that, and what kind of results? You get, not the ultimate goals, get these people off the rolls.
100%. Yep,
So,
absolutely.
is that too early in the process of determining how you're kicked off?
It likely is a little bit too early. I would say, though, the quick and short answer is there's a number of those same providers who never reapplied.
Right.
So the people who didn't reapply, it's like an automatic tell that, like, oh, hey, either we're not providing care, maybe we haven't been providing care, but you were listed as a provider, or you were fraudulently billing, right? In which case, now we will be able to actually pinpoint them and say, hey, this is where we need to investigate, whether it's the BCA today or whether it's the Independent Office of Inspector General tomorrow, or whether it's the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Nationwide Fraud Task Force. Now we have a target. And oh, by the way, on this whole revalidation process, obviously we can all see the importance and the need to root out the people who were fraudulent providers. But when we look at this is not just a Minnesota problem. What is happening here with revalidation in Minnesota will happen in every state in the country. It is only that we are going through this process first. And so it's important to know that, right? We can be the ones getting the flashy headlines. We are having these issues, and at the same time, we are at the tip of the spear because of the level of fraud that we have seen in Minnesota these last several years. So, but every state in the country will be going through this exact same process. Scott.
As a fact, IOG, I understand the process to get that person in place. How about the accountability end of it? Will that be at an office that reports directly to the sitting governor at the time? So like another commissioner position at the state level that will be accountable directly to the governor?
Yeah. So obviously we're going to be changing governors, right? We're going to have a brand new governor at the beginning of next year, right? Super excited for that. And that person ultimately, you should be informing the chief executive of what you're finding, right? These things that are happening within that governor's agencies. And so that person will provide that notification and report to the governor, unless the governor is the one who's implicated in the investigation, right? Right? And at that same time, so that person will be providing those reports to the chief executive. That person also will be providing those reports to the relevant committees within the legislature. And in addition to that, there is this specific setup committee of the legislature that is ultimately the appointing authority. And so it would be similar in nature to what you currently see in the Legislative Audit Commission, which is a bicameral and bipartisan group of legislators that receives this report and is also able to, help with the scrutiny of that person if that's the need. And then there is the mechanisms in law to remove that person if they, for whatever reason, aren't fulfilling their duties in a way that is, unethical and immoral.
So I'm hearing you say, though, that the governor can't remove that person.
That's correct. The governor cannot remove that person himself. Nope, not at all. It actually, that the governor does not have that authority at all. So, which in my eyes, that's good, right? But the legislature could. So a bipartisan, 60 vote threshold of the legislature could remove that person. In addition, that person, once appointed, will serve for 5 years, meaning you're outside of the scope of a governor's term, too. Questions, other questions?
I got a question about social workers.
Yeah.
So many of them are working from home. Are they going to bring them back into the office, which they should have been to start with? Because I heard of it's not in this county, but I heard in another county where the social worker was working from home, but she was in Smolio.
Those decisions are made depending upon whoever the employing entity is. Certainly, I am one who believes in in-person work, but at the same time, every different employer, whether you're a county or the state or the federal government, determines where those work requirements are. Is it in person? Is it at home? And that today and in this world of the future is changing, right? The marketplace today is having more people work from home and work remotely than ever before. And I don't anticipate that that's going to necessarily change. Obviously, there will always be jobs, and especially consumer facing roles that are going to be in person. But I believe that there will be a certain section of jobs that never return to being fully in person.
But how about them working inside the United States or living inside the United States?
Absolutely.
One from Somalia, I mean, this is ridiculous to have a case of
Yep.
somebody in another country. They can't, associate with any of their clients.
Oh,
It's
look,
ridiculous.
this is a tremendous issue, right? And it's my belief that we shouldn't be having a state employee for the state of Minnesota who lives in Florida, right? And
Right.
the same would be true. I have not heard this specific example of a social services worker working from Somalia, and yet at the same time, like that should be handled within that office, right?
Well,
That should be a
information
role.
is asked to the county, and the county says, that's fine with them.
Look, nothing that comes out of Hennepin County really surprises me at this point. So if they're employing someone from Somalia, look, I wouldn't be surprised, right? You all have probably seen the stories, right, of how there are like some Medicaid service providers are operating this Medicaid-funded program in Minnesota, and yet they're somehow a dignitary in Somaliland, right? And the money is just running back and forth, or one direction actually, and that's outrageous, and it needs to be stopped. But it needs to happen. We need to get after that through those lawful processes to hopefully hold those people accountable. Along those same lines, one really big thing that we're excited about from this session that was done is the concern has been that a lot of judges here in Minnesota haven't actually held fraudsters accountable. So the jury will convict and will say this person is guilty of fraud, of it might be like $10 million worth of fraud, and then it will go for sentencing to a judge here in Minnesota. And that judge, on a $10 million fraud scheme, will bring us that final, what am I trying to say? The final, the final part of the process.
Restitution.
Yeah, the restitution will only be $2 million for a $10 million fraud case. Like, where'd the other $8 million go? Or that same person will only have to spend 16 months in jail and will take $8 million. That's not acceptable to any one of us.
That's a criminal charge. Is there a way the state can go after civilly then to try to recover the rest?
I believe so, but what I was going to highlight is that based upon what we did this session, if you're convicted of fraud in Minnesota, we have a 100% tax on fraud now. And so it's an additional mechanism for us to be able to collect all of the money that person received through fraud. So that's another positive step from this session. I know it's kind of bizarre that you have to pass something like that, but in this era where we have judges who are doing what they're currently doing, it's something that was needed. Other questions? I know where we're at on time. Yes, sir, Brandon.
Brandon Voits, City of Foley, current mayor. I have two questions. One more so a comment, and maybe your insight and feedback. Yes, we are going to be changing governors, but we're going to be changing a lot of seats. Senate, House, a lot of folks are retiring, deciding not to rerun for a multitude of reasons. What is your take on what to expect, or what you think the future is of the House and Senate with all of the changes in folks to come?
Yeah,
With all the bills that haven't been passed and that are still outstanding, and almost like a reset.
Yeah.
For a lot of these bills, with new folks coming in with their opinions and thoughts.
Yeah, we are. We're going to have a brand new slate come next year. So For one, every single legislator is on the ballot this November. All 201 legislators, all senators, all House members are on the ballot, in addition to all of the state's constitutional offices. Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, State Auditor, and Secretary of State are all on the ballot this November. And to the mayor's point, there are a lot of retirements. Now, some of that is happening very, very naturally. And I'll just say it like this. There's people who have served for 12 or 16 years or more, 20 years, who they're hanging up the cleats, right? They're going into retirement. They're spending more time with grandkids, whatever it might be. But it's roughly a third of the legislature will be new. And so all of the future direction of the state lies in your hands at November's election. The entire state of Minnesota could see really big change, or we could be headed for more divided government, which means that everybody's voice is at the table. Certainly, I am hopeful that there will be a drastic change where we can move in the direction of a more conservative future, a lower cost state. One of my great concerns is the state has added over 6,000 new employees in the last 4 years. That comes at a cost of $750 million every single year to each and every one of us. State government's too big and it's doing too much, which means that it's failing at doing its job in the core competencies of what it should be doing. And so, to your question, I think that there's going to be a big change in terms of like the general direction of what we're prioritizing, what's happening, because the people who will then occupy the new leadership roles as committee chairs and in these different positions are likely to have a different view of what the state should look like. So at a certain moment, it's kind of exciting to think about there being new ideas permeating throughout the legislature, and that's a pretty natural thing to happen. I think the other thing that is happening in the background of all of this, and I don't want to miss this because this is important to all of us. We live in a constitutional republic, and trust in government feels like it's at an all-time low, and we have to build that trust back within government at the most local level and up. And I would say the way to do that is to be in communication, coming to events like this and engaging with your elected representatives. And the reason I mention that is we are coming up on this weekend is the one year anniversary of when Speaker Hortman was murdered in her home. And that happened, that was a pure act of political violence that should have never happened. We can all approach politics and governance through a lens of having different perspectives and disagreeing with one another, but never ever should it come to a point where we are pointing a gun at or seeking violence against our political opponents. And that is key to every single conversation that we have. And legislators, right? She served with me. She served in the same body, in the same chamber that I serve in today. And it's really hard. Every single legislator, and I'm sure other electeds in this room, you lock your door at night, you close the shades on your windows, and yet you wonder if you're safe inside your own home, right? That is real. And that's not easy to talk about, and we have to talk about it, right? Because there's no amount of security, there's no amount of law enforcement presence that can ever make a person feel safe. And yet that is what candidates for the legislature and elected officials face today. And it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to show love to the people who we disagree with and show them how to engage and participate in their government, in our government. America will only survive if we return to those commonly held beliefs that we all share that were written into our Constitution. And that's my ask for all of us as we move forward, is to not see that person who disagrees with us through the lens of them being your, enemy, and someone who you wish physical harm against. So I wanted to mention that especially, so thank you, Brandon, for providing that platform to talk about it, because it's a really big deal.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for the insight. And it kind of wraps into what I think, you know, if we're going to say first is fraud, second to me, then would be very closely followed by housing. Housing shortage across the nation, we're not unique in that way. The Housing First bill died again, I think 3 years in a row at this point.
You're talking about the zoning reform bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, you know, again, there's the good and the bad, I think with every bill, as we know. But when we think about property tax relief, well, cities aren't able to build houses because it costs too much. You know, builders and developers are retracting, and they're being very selective and choosy. Cities are trying to find unique ways to be able to make it work, put things together so that when we speak of affordable housing, right, at this point is a house under $400,000 is affordable,
Sure.
which is, right, it is a joke in itself. But when we talk about property tax relief, we know infrastructure is a big part of that. You know, that's one of the things that's driving cost. Just what it costs to put in the infrastructure, to put it in a new development or a new housing area within your town. You know, what do you see from the state side? You know, what you're trying, your platforms. How can we approach getting housing done in the state of Minnesota to help us with the property tax relief, help get folks into their homes? I believe the current average age now of first-time home buyer now is approaching 40 years old. Right, because of the housing crisis that we're in. And all of those are blending into making that perfect storm of, you know, making it unaffordable. Folks are trying to, you know, they're renting apartments now at a rate also that seems inappropriate. So that's one of my big concerns. How do we get there? How do we make that right? How do we continue to find ways to support infrastructure? You know, in every city is not unique in this way.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's an interesting one, and one that the legislature dealt with a bunch this session. There was approximately, there was a couple $100 million put into additional housing development through, what do they call it? HIBs, Housing Infrastructure Bonds, this session. And yet that's only just one very small piece of the pie. At the same time, there's these giant conversations around zoning ordinances and where those decisions should be made. And there's a push and a pull going on. And for the most part, that pull is around the suburban community, well, the urban and suburban communities over many suburban communities want to have the ability to shape their communities the way that they choose and not allow the state to preempt those local laws as it relates to planning and zoning. And those conversations are pretty dynamic as to who should have the jurisdiction to tell a community what they should look like. And I'm sure that those happen here locally. I think, you know, when I think there's an important point to this where we should talk about it from a statewide level and talk about it on a local level, right? When I think about Foley, the number one thing that I have heard from multiple conversations is that it's actually just the water infrastructure piece is the most important part, right? Whether that's your wastewater or whether that's your drinking water. And from a state perspective, we are very committed to that. Very committed to helping communities with water infrastructure, right? The state placed a huge role in the wastewater here, and at the same time, we're also, you know, helping the city of Gilman, and we're helping Ogilvy, and honestly, now Bach is going to have to navigate Highway 23. Like on a local level, it's water infrastructure. Like that's where my focus is helping on water infrastructure. And at that statewide level, though, those zoning conversations are ones that it's hard to say that there is momentum to strip local control away and give it to the state for those zoning purposes, because it would drastically reshape specifically the Twin Cities and could it potentially lower the cost of housing? Yeah, it potentially could, but those communities would no longer have the right to say what their community would look like. And Minnesota should be engaged in that. At this point, I think that the state's role should be on the core infrastructure piece. And I am not of the mind that that we should have the state tell Foley what it should look like, but instead help Foley get access to the water that it needs to serve its community. That's my perspective today, and open to feedback, but that's just what I've gotten from people in our community on that. So
Well, that is one of the, more spending parts of the process now is what it costs for a lot after you develop and put the infrastructure in.
yeah.
It's well over double what it was, 6 years ago. And so the more we can focus on the water infrastructure, whether it's clean water, wastewater, but more importantly, putting the infrastructure in to allow for development. And so that's where I'd like to see more funds available and how we can actually get the pipe and the construction of the development of the water infrastructure, right, wastewater and clean water combined, to actually build more housing.
I agree.
So,
I agree. Frankly, you raise an excellent point. How do we access dollars that can help any community in the state get greater access to water? And actually, I personally am of the mind that these pots of money already exist. They're just currently dedicated to the wrong things. So my opinion, and what I would ask for your support on long term, is we have these two constitutional amendments that are going to the environment and conservation, which are noble causes and right causes. But at the core of both of those two things is water. Minnesotans care about water. We all care about access to clean drinking water, to have access to the lakes and the rivers, and to enjoy the outdoors. Yes. And at the same time, isn't our most important need, like literally drinking water? And if it is that, why aren't the pots of money that are found in the Legacy Fund or the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars that should be accessible to local municipalities or to the state as it relates to water quantity and quality? And like that's where my big question is soon, I believe it's 2033 is when the Legacy Amendment will have, it's on its like 25-year period. It's when it will have to be renewed by that point in time. If given the opportunity to serve our community next session, and if Republicans had a majority, I would be pursuing allowing those dollars to be spent on things like clean drinking water and to expand access to that. I think that that's a worthwhile expenditure of money, and we can do it with the money that is already in that pot of money. And I think that that would be a worthwhile use. So long term, that's what I think. You had a follow-up question.
Yeah, Dan Colster, the superintendent of public schools.
Yeah.
You mentioned quickly the ballot that's going to include the potential amendment change for legacy dollars,
Yeah.
which was created to fund schools.
So not quite. No, the
Well,
like
it was 2 sections of land for every single school district.
you're talking about the trust lands.
Trust
Let me
lands.
talk about that. I haven't talked about it
Is
yet.
that what you were referring to?
No, something
Okay.
entirely
Yeah, I
different.
just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that.
No, but thank you for bringing that up because I haven't talked about that yet.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's what I believe that we should be doing with the Legacy Fund. So that's the future. One other thing that's going to be on your ballot this fall is another constitutional amendment which gives access to more money for schools based upon how we manage our trust lands, public trust lands that are especially in northern Minnesota, and the state gains dollars from this through forestry and through mining of our trust lands in northern Minnesota. And the benefit, as set up by the Constitution, is actually to Minnesota kids in every corner of the state. And now this constitutional amendment would unlock additional dollars that you and I won't have to pay in taxes, but are instead just coming through the trust lands And it's really exciting because it's going to increase per pupil funding significantly. And so I would ask all of you in this room to vote for that amendment this fall, because the picture of how much additional money is going to be today is only a picture in time, and that amount of money is going to go up significantly in years to come. In addition, as our state chooses to strategically use our natural resources for mining and for forestry, it only increases the amount of money that's going to every single kid in every corner of this state. So it's a win, 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 and I hope you'll all support it this fall.
Yeah, the dollar amounts are approximately $30 to $40 per pupil, which is not a lot at this point, but at the same time, these are funds that they're limited at this point by law as to what schools can receive, and the funds are continuing to grow and grow and grow, and they're just sitting there because it's not allowed to give more back to the schools. So I totally agree with you. It's not something that's going to cost the taxpayer a dime. It's already sitting there. It's just, as you stated, unlocking those funds for our school district.
It's a really big deal for the future, right? And when he says $30 or $40 per pupil per year, right, with opportunity for growth, like, this is where Minnesota kids will be set apart from kids in other parts of the nation. Like, we will be set apart because of the way that past leaders in Minnesota, and that you today, when you vote for that, that you will create for their opportunity for future generations. It's really exciting. Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, you brought up the kids. So my last time I was able to come here, my concern was about 12-year-olds being able to make their decisions at the medical records. And I sent you and
Yes.
Wiesenberg an email. But so the appointment came, and of course I think it's ridiculous that 12-year-olds are supposed to make these medical decisions and discuss everything. I understand why this has to be, but for families that don't have these kind of situations, it makes it hard for us. So I brought my daughter, and then the questionnaire that you need to check, I read the questions out loud in the main office, so everyone can hear what kind of questions that they're supposed to answer. And my daughter is like, why are they asking this? There was questions about self-harm. We live in a fairy tale world. Anyone that knows we're in a fairy tale world, but she felt very uncomfortable. And unfortunately, I was going to have her come to the last town hall so she could talk to you about this. It's too much responsibility being put on these 12-year-olds. And then every year I get something from the county, like things to expect in this year of growth and stuff. And so this one for her talked about, if I remember right, I got so mad and I threw it away, discussions about masturbation, the HPV shot I think was on there, which prevents cervical cancer, but it just was so uncomfortable that I was supposed to talk to her about this. And so I just want to know, are you guys continuing to fight for the innocence of the children? I mean, Minnesota cares about their children so much, but what are we doing to protect the innocence of them? Because actually, too, this year was her first experience dealing with a friend with cutting issues, and it broke her heart. And she said, why would they do that to themselves? Because we believe that we are children of God, and why would we hurt God's temple? And so it was a very awkward conversation. I was not expecting that at 12 years old. 16, 17, yes. And unfortunately, this is the world that we're living in now. But it happened at a school activity, and I didn't make teachers aware of it after the fact. It was the last day of school. I'm like, you gotta tell me these things when it happens. But what are you guys still pushing to protect innocence, or are we just saying, here's some money, let's give it to the schools and make sure they have adequate textbooks and stuff, but not actually, I see mental health here is on the school funding, but what are we doing to let kids be kids and not have to talk about these adult matters at 10, 11, 12 years old? So are you guys still fighting for that, or?
Absolutely.
No way.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful points. Let me just start with this. We'll be fighting this battle in perpetuity. And what I mean by that is like the forces of evil will always be trying to push down onto our kids. And there is an inability for me or any politician or any legislature or Congress to truly be able to stop everything bad from ever happening to a kid. And at the same time, we have to do everything we can to protect the innocence of that child. So your specific circumstance was over, when you're interacting with the medical field in a hospital. Sometimes I would openly ask the question, how much can I stay ahead of the next question that they're going to be trying to ask your son or your daughter, right? How can state government keep up with that from a legislative perspective? It should come through culture change. Like, I want the kids who grow up in Foley to go to school and become doctors and involved in a hospital and making decisions where they no longer are like, I don't need that information, I don't want that information, and I want to protect the innocents. That's a long-term picture on that. In the short term, nothing happened this session to specifically help as it relates to the medical field and the questions that you got from a doctor or medical professional. However, major change happened this year to protect kids online. And like really super significant stuff that honestly I expect is going to be challenged in the court of law was passed by the legislature. And I will do my best to describe, I think it was 2 separate pieces of legislation to protect kids, but one of them is this. One of them is that it's in essence age-appropriate design for social media. And so there is essentially age verification tools that social media companies, and for our conversations we're largely talking about Facebook, where instead of having this continued ability to just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and come across content that isn't appropriate for their eyes, state government is now seeking to curb that ability from a social media company to allow for that, for the strategic design of those platforms to be able to do that. Now again, I expect that that's going to be challenged in law, but that is one massive tool. It is something that was supported on both sides of the aisle. The Minnesota Family Council was a huge proponent of that legislation, and it's something where the legislature as a whole is looking to say, how can we protect kids online? That's like the premise, the goal behind it. And then number 2 is with the advance of AI. The concern has been that AI tools today could take a picture of you and make you nude, right? And so additional legislation was passed to curb that and provide penalties to any technology or any platform that provides the tools to allow for that to happen. And so I believe that both of those 2 things are positive steps to protecting kids from the abuses and harms that are found online. That's what happened this year, but it is an evergreen challenge for us to protect our kids, and we always have to be vigilant for the future. And I look forward to continuing the work as it relates to that which is pushed onto our kids, whether it's through education or whether it's through the medical field.
And the reason to, so if you have grandkids and stuff, so actually what ended up happening too, what got me more boiled up is, I needed to know, she ended up in the ER for something, and then the ER told me it was okay to give Tylenol and ibuprofen together, as certain they like to live with those. And then I tried to access that information on what the correct dosage was, and I couldn't. Every single, on her 12th birthday, every single thing except for her birth was wiped out. And so I ended up contacting one of my nurse friends, and because my chart, expect a 48-hour answer. You're not going to call 911, but dosage. And thank God for nurses, by the way. But I'm like, everything is wiped away, not even, because I think her emergency visit was like October or something. It was a few months ago, and And I did end up getting medical proxy, but it was a click of a button. They were able to just access me, but my daughter had to approve it, and I'm like, this is insane. And then I had to explain, not all families are in in good situations and stuff. So there is a need for it, but I would say the bigger chunk doesn't need that kind of limit. And now another scenario where the good are being punished, you know. And it just was bizarre to me that I couldn't access anything, and so I just, they made it public allowed, and so everyone could hear what 12-year-olds are supposed to be answering. But I appreciate your work and just
No,
keep
thank
fighting
you.
for the children, the children of the future. I mean,
That's our most important priority, right?
I hope so. It should be.
Right. Any final questions? Yes.
I have a question for the mayor. Before we think about building more in Foley, our water is terrible. We are on our 3rd cadetical, and we live right in Foley. My name is Debbie Bloom, and I've showed it to multiple people at the city. Nothing gets done. I mean, why would we build more if we can't get our water decent?
It's in our future project plan to put in a water treatment facility, that we know we need it. Nobody wants to pay for it, but we know we need it. So it's I would say within 3 years, a decision has to be made and construction probably has to be started for a new water, we don't have one, a water treatment facility plant. That would also include a new well and a new ground tank to hopefully allow for cleaner water. We have some groundwater spots throughout our community, but it's a $16 million project coming off of a $24 million
And the
wastewater.
medical systems are not cheap.
No.
We're on our 3rd.
It's definitely, it's very much going to happen. It's not even a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. How far can we go and push that limit to not put that burden, right? Another burden on top of our wastewater burden. Thank you, Representative Schultz, for helping with some of that cost.
Yeah, let me take that a little bit. So Foley isn't unique in this, and I wish it was. And much of what you're talking about in your own water quality is actually something that comes from naturally occurring sources in the water, right? Or the soil, the area where we live. And this is an issue of water quality that can be found in almost every corner of the state. Oftentimes it's a different thing, right? Whether it's high in iron or if you have PFAS, there are different issues for water quality across the whole state. That is one of the most important reasons why I say we should be tapping these funds that we already are taxed on in one form or another and be putting it towards water quality and quantity, right? We should be focusing on that. I want to help conserve the environment and restore natural habitat for ducks and deer and bears and whatever else, yes. And at the same time, today feels like the human need is greatest for water quality and quantity in our communities. And so it's my belief that those mechanisms should be used to help support communities have filtration systems. And then the other point, and I welcome your feedback on this as we talk about this for the long term, but what we should be asking the question on is, right now in Minnesota, there's a huge amount of money in private investment that is proposed for the state in industrial development through data centers. Data centers are a really hot topic, and people have perspectives on all sides. But the question that I want to ask you and any Minnesotan is this: if we could see the private investment in data centers into our state in any corner, and that data center who comes in could say that as they are using our resources, whether it's in water or the air for air cooling or just using the land, can we be asking that development to play a role in cleaning the water that they're using in our community? So I'm going to use an example. In basically the area where 3M operated on the southeast side of Metro, they have a lot of PFAS in their water. It's not safe for human consumption. It can impact human health. And at the same time, the 3M money won't go far enough to provide a water filtration system for every single household who lives in East Metro. But what if what if we said that data centers were specifically welcome in that area if, and we would provide the regulatory framework for them to invest in that area so long as they were cleaning the water as it passed through, so that the human consumption in that area could all benefit from having clean water. And I asked that question for us to say, what can future industrial development in our communities do to ensure that you and Foley have cleaner water? And I know it's you want an answer today, and we all know the government moves slowly, but we should be asking these questions. How can we appropriately clean our water in a community and as a state so that we all and future generations benefit from it? Those are the questions I think we should be asking. But that's a really good one. Thanks for bringing it up. Anything more you wanted to add to that, Brandon?
No, stay tuned. We've toured plants, we've done the things, we've secured, I believe, $2 million so far. The goal is to hopefully secure about half. And that's what we'll be fighting for these next year or two, is how can we have more of that state money and federal money to help pay and offset the cost of what this is going to be, because inevitably it is going to happen, which will be good. It'll be good for clean water, it'll be good for all the folks of the community, including new folks that will be entering the community, but we know it's needed, and again, not unique to us. Ogilvy is almost wrapped up, it looks like, with their water treatment facility plan, and that's a community significantly smaller than ours, with the same bills. It's with less people to pay for it, so it's tough.
The question, right? And I get it. And I don't know your circumstance. You might be living on a fixed income today, but for so many families, if I were personally guiding any family, whether it's someone that lives in Lake Elmo, or someone who lives in Foley, or someone who lives in Ogilvy, wherever, St. Bob, doesn't matter. If you are encountering a water quality challenge, wherever you are, I would ask the question to you to say, okay, if this challenge exists for you today, I imagine that you want that problem to be solved in 5 years. So any home can have its own water filtration system too. And it could come at personal expense. But when we're looking at it through the lens of 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, is that an expense that you want to incur for your home so that your home has the clean drinking water that you want? And I think that that's a worthy question that we should all be asking. And I'm not a private well, so I'm certainly I deal with my own impacts on that. But we should ask those questions. And yes, we want government to take action on it for all of Foley or for all of Lake Elmo, whatever it is. But ask that question too. What can I do for my own family as well? All right, with that, we're nearing our end here, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. We live in one incredible place, and please continue to be involved in your government. I appreciate the mayor being here, Pam being here from the school. Thank you, Dan, for being here as well. And just continue to stay involved. And then, water is a perfect nexus to be thinking about the future too. But now we are in election season. We are in the moment. Candidates have filed for office or are filing for office if it's local office, and November is coming quickly. Think about how the state can look different, and I certainly will be talking about that in the months ahead, but I want you to seek to try and see the kind of change that you want to see in Minnesota exhibited through our state government, and I invite you to be a part of that. So thank you so much for being here today. Have a great, great summer. And let's give it up for the Stevens family and Sable Inn for hosting us again today.